Right, so we are at the how. I'm going to start my screen share and we'll get started. Okay, so we've talked about the what of the workout, we've talked about the why of the workout, and now we're going to talk about the how, which is kind of bringing all of these things together and providing intentional coaching, which is coaching with purpose. It's coaching that has a reasoning behind it, and it's not as randomized as we might have been doing in the past. So we planned the what, we pulled out a why, now we're going to plan the how. So if you plan the how, one very important thing is that it kind of can ease your nerves. So if you are practicing a certain way of explaining things, or if you are nervous about explaining a topic that you may not be as familiar with, or something that you're learning yourself, right? A lot of these concepts I would be learning about myself, and then I'd create a workout for them. And it was kind of that practice that helped me also really facilitate the concept in my own training. So it can ease your nerves if you kind of know what you're going to say, you know the things that you want to hit on, you know that the points you want to make, you've kind of thought about some of the cues that you're going to provide and information you're going to provide and information you're not going to provide. So it helps you remember. I don't know if you've ever, certainly happens to me, I hear a cue or I see an explanation and it's really, really good. I'm going to explain that next time. Then you get into class and there's a lot going on and it just leaves my brain. So it helps you remember when you have at least written it down and planned it, even if you don't reference it back all the time. Sometimes that even just writing it down one time can help you remember it. It also can help you answer questions. So when certain questions come up, it can guide your explanation. So you can say things, you can answer things within the context of the workout, and you can also not address things within the workout, because you might have them been working on a hinge pattern and they have a question, something about something else. And so you can tell them, I really want to work with you on that, but right now I want you to work on this hinge pattern. Or I definitely want to hit you up after class about that because that deserves some explanation or that deserves some conversation with me. But right now I want you to think of that, of work on this hinge pattern. So it helps you answer questions and it can guide your explanations of movements and why we're doing what we're doing. It can also improve your critical thinking. So when you're thinking about a movement pattern and where you want the body to position, what are some creative ways that you're going to explain that? How can you elicit change in another person? What information can you provide them? And sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes I would say cues that did not land, or I would come up with something and they would be like, what? And then other times it was really, really helpful, or they would, and I would get great feedback on it. And so you become a critical thinker about how you visualize movement and how you want to explain or get somebody else's body to do something different. It also can drive your modifications and your amplifications. So anytime that you're providing a modification or an amplification, it's always in this realm of why did I plan what I planned and how did I explain it? So your modifications and amplifications aren't necessarily always movement based. Now they become your why, based on your why, and also based on your how. So if you are providing a modification, maybe you're going to take your how, your cue, and you're going to give them a modification where they utilize that cue. And it might be a completely different movement pattern, but they're utilizing that cue and they're finding that positioning that you're trying to get them in. And then they can take that newfound positioning or that newfound stimulation, that newfound, oh yeah, I feel my lats now. And then they can apply it to whatever movement, you might be wanting them to work on. We'll just review quickly our 8 basic movement patterns: push, pull, squat, hinge, rotation, anti-rotation, carry, impact, absorption. You're going to see these come up in the workouts. Our basic accessory mobility for our postpartum clients: hip internal, external rotation, hip abduction and adduction, pelvic floor mobility, rib cage mobility, scapular mobility, and spinal segmentation. Putting all of these together also into a pregnancy and postpartum mobility set. So there'll be videos to accompany each of these things, and they can be something you can incorporate in class, or something that you can just send people to help them. You can just say, here, do this at home, or do this as part of your warm up. Very often I have provided a kind of a recommendation for a client, like, okay, every warm up, I want you to do this movement. Even if we don't do it as a whole, I want you to do this movement. And so then it's on them to work into it, work that into part of their warm up. Okay, so we have our roadmap. Let's talk about, we're working over here in the cues and concepts. I kind of breezed right over that, didn't I? So we have our what down here, which is our series 1, 2, or 3. We have our how, or our intent, or our why, our intention, and our theme, or why we've selected the workout that we have. And remember, we don't have to get complicated with these things. We can have workouts that are designed for community building. We can have our intention or theme be getting to know your workout partners. You can design a workout just for that. It doesn't have to be movement pattern based. It doesn't have to be accessory based. It doesn't have to be concept based. It can be something fun. You can have a workout that is Valentine's Day theme, and that's your theme though. But when you have an intention or a theme or a why, your explanations, your cues and concepts are driven by that intention or theme. So now we're working over here in these 3 boxes off to the side for cues, concepts that we want to start talking about and including in our workout. Okay. Uh-oh. Oh man, hold on. How to choose a cue. Okay, so how to choose your cues and your concepts. Things that you want to consider is, does it relate to your audience? Do they know the muscle names that you're using? If you're saying pull your lats down, or if you're saying like use your lats, do they know what lats are? Similarly, do they, if you're saying stack your egg, do they know what that means? Do they know the concept that you're teaching? Have they heard it before? And even if they've heard it before, have they applied it to this movement? And those are 2 different things, right? You might have gone over stack your egg for, something like a squat position or a hinge, let's say. And now they're in a jump rope. And so they associate stack your egg with hinge. And so when you're saying it during a jump rope, it like does not compute for them, right? So if something is a reminder or if something is new, obviously we have to think about the cue and how complicated it is or how nuanced it is. If you were to just walk around saying, pick up a blueberry, and you'd never said that before, people would be like, with my fingers, like with my hand, right? But actually, usually when we use that, pick up a blueberry, we're using that activation of the pelvic floor, right, of the perineum. So that's very different than literally picking a blueberry. If you have somebody new there and you're just walking around going, okay, inhale and exhale, pick up your blueberry before you jump. What? Where's my blueberry? Right? So you have to like consider the audience and consider if this is a reminder or if this is something new. Also consider what the intensity of the workout or the skill is. A higher intensity, you want to give fewer cues. Your nervous system is much more taxed in a higher intensity move, a higher rep or a higher max. Your nervous system is busy doing other things. It can't think about your breath, your stack, where your shoulders are, et cetera, et cetera. So fewer cues for higher intensity or a higher weight. Newer skills also should have fewer cues. If it's the first time you're teaching, or if it's the second or third time you're teaching Turkish get-ups, those are very complicated. Fewer cues. Maybe you want to just focus on one aspect of the Turkish get-up, locking out that elbow as they rise up, or something like press up to the sky, up to the sky, up to the sky, up to the sky, right through the whole movement. And then as they become more familiar with the skill, you can start to layer in some other concepts. Lower intensity, you can include more cues. If you're going slower, maybe you're doing something at a slower speed so that you can have them thinking about more things. And a familiar skill, obviously, if they're like knocking back Turkish get-ups, if that's something that you're maybe focusing on or you have focused on, they know the movement pattern. You can start to share and layer some of these cues. It seems intuitive, but when you're planning, you want to consider that. You also want to think about okay, I think I did do this. Yes. You also want to think, I wasn't sure if this is on the next slide. You want to think about where they are in the workout, right? The longer the workout's been going on, like if you're at the 40-minute mark of a 60-minute workout, they're probably pretty smoked. They've probably heard those cues already. And they might, it might be a taxing workout. So they're not able to as necessarily connect with those physical cues that you might be giving them or things to think about. Their nervous system is kind of toasted. So you want to use, we've talked about explaining your why at the additional warm-up time at the top of the workout, because it's kind of before their brains have been taxed already. Same thing with like cues and concepts. You should be sharing a more bulky instructional or bulk of your cues earlier in the workout. And then as it goes on, you'll see actually in my boxes as I fill out, it gets like less and less, because I just know we're at the end of it. People are done. People are toasted. Their brains are off, right? Their nervous systems are ready to switch to recovery. So you want to think about that, putting like, if you're going to put something really, really complicated that they have to work on at the end of the workout, they might be zoned. So this is, I love this is from Whiteboard Daily. If you don't follow them, they have great coaching cues and coaching tips. It's definitely more like Olympic style lifting and traditional barbell lifting, but there's a lot of great information there. So I highly recommend you follow them on Instagram if you don't already. One thing he talks about is up to 70% of your one rep max, 3 cues per movement. So this is a 1 rep max. So this is weight. It's referring to how much you could like deadlift one time and still maintain your form. But what if we think about that as like your 1 rep max speed for 200 meters, right? You can transition this concept to other movements of a 1 rep max. Like let's say your 1 rep max is 10 burpees. So as fast as as seamless form as you can make it for 10 reps of burpees, up to 70% of that. Like you can think of before 70% of that, you can think of using 3 cues. But once you get to like 70, 90, you're moving faster, you're lifting more weight, your nervous system is more taxed. We drop that down to about 2 cues. And then anything over 90%. So this is like your full out sprint. This is as fast as you can go. This is as heavy as you can go, 1 cue. So it's that same concept of like slowly decreasing the amount of information, the higher the intensity is getting. When to provide cues. Lower intensity, you can give them during movement. People can think about it. It's a lower intensity. Higher intensity, I always recommend before the movement, and then you let them move. And that way they can actually be thinking about it and they're not having to listen, process, and execute, if that makes sense. All right, let's talk about types of cues. Move my little box here. All right, types of cues. A visual cue. It's providing a representation or similarity to a common object. So this is objects that we all know. This might be, well, I'm going to give you examples in a minute. Activation or awareness. Muscles or areas to contract, directions to move in, and areas to be aware of. This is one where you might start using muscle names. And I just want to caution you, make sure that that's audience specific and that they know what you're talking about. And also that even common body parts that you think people should be or know. I've encountered clients who don't know where their scapula is. And here I am saying scapula. So when are you saying scapula versus shoulder blade? When are you saying, you know, your pelvic bone versus your hip bone? Like it seems so not a big deal, but it actually can be. People might not connect this as a pelvis. They might not know that. And then a location cue, providing two locations and their relationship to each other. You can think of this as like even the shoulders relationship to the floor, or your shoulders relationship to your hip, your knees relationship to your hip, or something like that. Like two things, where are the end space and how do you want to change that space in between them? Here's some examples. So at the top here is what we just went over, the different types of cues. Below it, we have examples. So a visual would be stack your egg, right? People know what an egg looks like, and then you can explain that concept. Fold at your jeans pocket. I use that a lot, like right at your jeans pockets, you wanna fold there. Pick up a blueberry. These are all visual things. You're not actually picking up a blueberry with your perineum. This is a visual representation of what we want them to do. Activation or awareness. Relax your shoulders, right? That's what I want you to be aware of, that your shoulders are hiked up here. I want you to literally like relax the tension. Untuck your pelvis, tucking and untucking your pelvis. That might be hips, depending on my audience. Shift your weight here, right? This gets into a little bit of a location based. And what you might find, the more you kind of think about this, is like, this is kind of location and well, yes, some of these might fall into multiple categories, but hopefully you can think about a cue and then think about different ways of saying it. What are you trying to get them to do? And maybe think of it in a different way. What's a location-based way of saying, like, relax your shoulders? I could say, let your shoulder blades fall towards your hips, right? So now I'm providing them a location base, and that might resonate with people versus relax your shoulders. They might be like, okay, I'm relaxed. Okay, here I am, I'm relaxed. And now if I say, can you push your shoulder blades towards your hips? Oh, right? So it's the same movement. It's the same, I'm trying to elicit the same response, but I'm getting it with different ways. So location, elbows hug your ribs, shoulders away from your ears. That's another one. So again, same movements can be explained in a couple of different ways. Okay, so now let's do it. Let's actually do a planning workout. So I planned 2 workouts here. I've kind of broken them down into my planning process. And I want you to know that I'm going to explain it faster than it took me to think of it. So if as you're doing this, you're like, oh my gosh, she did this so fast. Like, I'm not doing this real time. This does take some time. And especially when you're just getting used to it, or you're just starting to think about this in a new way, it can, practice improves your execution always across all things, right? So this was a workout that can't remember, but I got it. So we have the what, and now we're going to extrapolate or pull out a why. We can apply a concept to this. So we have the workout, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to work on this concept of stack your egg. So during I'm going to move my video. During my cues and explanation, or my notes and cues, I know that I need to explain stacking the shoulders over the hips. So stack my egg. What does that mean? Where? I'm going to write down that I need to do that, and I'm going to tell them why. To improve your pressure management. I like to think of a 3-point connection, the back of the head in between the shoulder blades and the back of the pelvis. I don't like to include the lower back in that straight line because we have a natural arch in our back that's actually really important to maintain. My basic warm-up is going to remain the same, but for my specific warm-up, I'm going to put them on a wall and I'm going to have them feel that 3-point connection and then change it. What happens when I take my shoulders off, right? Like, what happens when I take my pelvis off that connection? Like, what does this feel like? What does it feel like when I'm dropping my head forward and I'm losing that connection behind there? What do all those things feel like? They're also doing, they're also doing a quarter or a half wall sit. So we're getting warm. I also am going to do a light overhead carry in all directions, forward, sideways, and back. We're going to overcorrect. So I'm going to have them overhead and feel what it's like to change that, the stack, and how it changes their ability. That's why I'm going to have them do it very light, because obviously I don't want them to do heavy and then overcorrect, right? And then since I am going to do some jump roping in there, I definitely want to remember an impact warm up. And I'm going to do that, kind of talk through some of those concepts during this specific warm up time. So now I'm going to plan out my cues and concepts. Oops. We just got a sneak peek of the next one. Okay, so cues and concepts. I know for this jump roping, I want to talk about your feet coming forward. So you're kind of make a banana shape versus the feet going back. And we're at the bottom of the pause squats. I want them to check that positioning of the rib cage to pelvis. One thing that I want to mention, I meant to mention it before we started explaining the workout. These rep ranges and times and even rounds are very fluid because I realize that space changes a lot of this. How much, like how loud, how big of a group might change. So I really need you guys to take ownership over the fact that these rep schemes and timeframes might not work for you. You might need to alter those to fit your space and your group appropriately. So please do that. Don't take these as written in stone. Okay, series 2. So 4 to 5 rounds. Now I want to think about, we did this a lot of forward and back and stacking the egg in that first. So now I want to take it, I'm going to take it laterally. So stack the egg lateral. So I'm going to apply stack the egg to this lateral movement. I think this workout was actually written for like planes of movement. And so now I'm just taking the stack your egg, and I'm just applying that to all the movements here. So pelvis, I'm going to use the visual of pelvis and shoulders being headlights, and what happens to our headlights when we break. They kind of either point up or point down, and can I keep them pointing straight ahead? That might not work, but right. And especially for the side plank hip dips where you're in a side plank and your pelvis drops down, right? Those headlights stay facing forward. We don't tilt them up and we don't tilt them down. They stay straight. They stay pointing forward. On all my lateral movements, I also want to cue them to keep their toes pointing ahead, because when we turn the toe out, now our hips and shoulders have a tendency to go that way. And we can also unstack our egg rotationally, right? Which is a little bit of a sneak peek to the next workout. It's not just forward and back. So that might be something that I mentioned in passing. You can see my cues have decreased here. During these it's just a finisher Tabata. It's 3 Tabatas, a full sprint Tabata. So sprinting just the entire time. Jump lunges for just the entire Tabata, and then planks for just the entire Tabata. Again, take ownership of this if you wanted to mix it up, if you wanted to add something in there. But what are you going to add in if you're like deer in headlights, I'm using headlights, see? What are you going to add in? Go back to the intention in your theme. What are some movements where you see people struggle to maintain this stacked position? What are some movements that you think you can take this concept and help them feel it or experience it? That's what I would add in. So if you want to mix it up in a different way or add on to that, how do you do that? Go back to your intention or your theme. What makes sense? How can you work on that concept with them? I like to talk about, especially at the end of workouts, how fatigue usually ends up revealing a lot of your tendencies as you get tired. Is your head starting to drop? Are your shoulders starting to drop, or are you starting to lift because now you're out of breath, right? So now we're coming off of here, and just having them notice. So I'm not correcting them at this point. I'm not saying like, oh, do this, do that. I'm just saying start to notice what your own personal tendencies are. Stack your egg, applied to a workout. So this was a what, why, how. Next up. Now we're going to do why, what, and how. So I chose to focus on anti-rotation. I love focusing on anti-rotation for pregnancy and postpartum moms. Rotation is an essential part of movement. And I think all too often we focus on too much of anti-rotation. But if you take some time to find out where they are rotating and where you can employ an anti-rotation, it's usually hugely beneficial to their strength training. Like it usually, once they feel like, oh, I always rotate here a little bit, and then you can provide them some corrective measures, it can be very mind-blowing. So I love working anti-rotation movements, even though I don't want you to think that rotation is bad. You could have an entire workout about rotation. You could do an anti-rotation rotation workout. Okay, too much, Amanda, too much. All right, this was kind of my planning focus, or my planning process. So I definitely knew that I wanted to talk about evening up the pelvis, so that when we have some rotation coming onto our bodies, what we can use is our entire pelvis, right? This like really strong bone, this bone set in our body to help us control that rotation and help us control where we're going. I definitely knew, and so I kind of want to explain that up here. In my basic warm-up and my specific warm-up, I probably should have left that off for now, because I think I went back and filled out my specific warm-up. Specific warm-ups it might be helpful for you. I think I mentioned maybe back in the last video, coming back and doing your specific warm-up last, because then you know what the workout is and how you're going to plan on utilizing those movements. And so the specific warm-up is just like, it falls right into place. I knew I definitely wanted to do deadlifts. I knew I wanted to do single-sided loaded deadlifts. So not single-sided double load deadlift, but a single side load deadlift. And I want to talk about being even. So it's not rotation, right? Like this is your anti-rotation as you deadlift. I should probably just get my butt up and show you. But anyways, I also really want to use the cue of spread your butt cheeks, because I find that people who kind of tuck their pelvis under, not right now, almost done. No, Nathan, I can't right now.
You have to come.
I know that. Okay, I'm gonna get back to my work. Mom life. Okay, so single-sided, spread your butt cheeks. I really wanted to use that at the bottom of the deadlift to pull that pelvis out of that tucked position if they're in it. I definitely want to use pull-off presses. They're like a classic anti-rotational movement. And then I have this idea for bear crawls, to do somebody holding a bear crawl and then a partner coming over to them and like pushing their shoulders or just leaning gently with their leg or even gently with their hand, but giving them some challenge. So not too hard to knock them over, but like challenging them, not just in a forward back, but like, what if I come and like push your pelvis laterally? What if I push your shoulder laterally? What if I pull your shoulder back in space, right? On one side versus the other, and just having the other partner hold that bear crawl while their other partner kind of manipulates or tries to challenge them in that way. So those were kind of my three things. And then I didn't know how I was going to work it into a workout. So this is what I did. An 8 to 10 minute ANRAP. Again, you need to take liberty with the time on this if it doesn't work for your space and your group. I timed this workout out and it was about 27 minutes with no explanation, no moving in between the series. But I also had increased rest because I am expecting. So I increased my rest quite a bit. And I didn't do the run, which we'll get to. So if you include a warm-up, specific warm-up, explanation, and some cool down, I think you'd probably get there, but it was like 27 minutes of pretty much consecutive work. So 8 to 10 minutes ANRAP, not alternating sides. So I want to just do one side and then the other. So it's not right, left, it's like 5 on the right, 5 on the left. 8 to 12 deadlifts, regular RDLs. Then one leg back, but that single side load that I was talking about. So they hold the weight or the weights in one hand. And then we're talking about not letting that rotation, not letting that weight rotate them. 8 to 12 weighted squats, and then 5 lunges right, 5 lunges left, all loaded on the right side. So weight on one side, right leg forward, 5 lunges, left leg forward, weight on the left side. So we're going from this like double position to this single side loaded position and what that does for our rotation. Same thing with swings, 8 to 12 dumbbell swings, 5 with just the right, 5 with just the left, a short run or a rest depending. Next up was my pull-off presses. I knew I wanted to get them in. So I have my more complex lifts, squats, heavier neurological demand, right? In that first series, that pull-off press, bear crawls, they become a little bit more accessory work and secondary work. So 8 to 10, bear crawl, shoulder taps. I want to do the right side only because I don't want them to have that momentum to take into a rotation. So I want them right side, right side, right side, anti-rotation. This pull-off press is holding out the pull-off press, stepping back into a reverse lunge, and then up to a high knee raise. So you can play with, and this is something that I played with, which leg you want them to go back on. So if I have my band anchored to my left and my hands out, am I going to step my right leg back or my left leg back? I actually ended up doing it both, and I did one side, I alternated. So it was like right leg steps back, I turn around, left leg steps back, turn around, and then I switch sides. So now I'm anchored and my opposite leg is inside. And there was a huge difference side to side, depending on which leg stepped back. So that was really interesting to kind of think about and experience. That might be way too complicated for your setup for as many people as you have in class. You might want to say only the right knee steps back, or only the outside leg steps back. You could do that outside or inside leg steps back. Bear crawl, shoulder taps on the left side only, and then you're turning around to the other side for that other side of the pull-up press, whichever way you decide. And then some rest. The last part, I knew I wanted to do that partner push pull with the bear crawl, and also a single leg bridge. Again, a single leg bridge is this awesome opportunity to see where our tendencies are with rotation. And I wanted a partner to help you with that. Like, are your hips even? Can you push that hip up even more? And so this becomes a bear crawl and then a single leg right, doing some bridges and just seeing what your tendencies are with your pelvis. And then you could do a finisher of choice. I just threw in here the Sally Up Flower by Moby with a bridge lift and a hover. I mean, you could do a lot of different things here. So now we will go, I don't know where to put my video here so that you can still see me. Okay. My cues and concepts. So I knew that I wanted to use that spread your butt cheeks out. But I also want them to turn their lifted toe to the ground for those single leg, single side loaded deadlifts. So that's a location-based cue that I can provide them. Just evening out the pelvis during the swings even, right? Or probably more the deadlifts too, instead of lifting that one side where the back toe is lifted, evening out the pelvis. And then looking like you're equally loaded, so that your hands are going down evenly.
Mom's calling you because he has to go pee.
Okay, you can tell him he can get up and go do that. Okay, so cues and concepts for our second series. The pelvic tuck under load also, right? So now when we're in bear crawl, I want to cue them to like tuck and untuck their pelvis from a bear crawl position. And also side to side, like moving their pelvis side to side. So not only does the pelvis need to even out forward and back, but the pelvis needs to even out rotationally. So it's like a bowl of water, right? And that water could spill out. And this is my visual cue. that water could spill out in many different directions. So can you keep a nice even support on the sides of the bowls? For the next series, I just want to make sure that I give them an option to come to a kickstand. Single leg bridges can be really, really hard, especially for at the end of a workout. Again, they're probably already tired. So I want to remind myself to give them that option to kickstand that upper foot, but not come to an even position. I don't want an even position. I want staggered and kickstand with the heel. And then which hip wants to drop more or less? Is it hard to keep them even? Again, I just want this to be self-awareness. Fatigue usually reveals discrepancies side to side. So isn't that interesting? And then we're just going to finish it off all together by using a song or doing something collectively. So that was the planning process for this. Again, when you're talking about this how, we don't need to get, or when we're talking about the why, it doesn't need to be complicated. It can be, and it doesn't have to be. But when it's not, at least you provided yourself guidance for cues and concepts. If your workout is a theme workout, you might not be using spread your butt cheeks. And what that means, turn your lifted toe to the ground, right? You might just have them do deadlifts and cheer their partner on. Like that's their workout, or that's the cue that you're using, is cheer your partner on. So be mindful as you're developing that how, the cues and the concepts. Always go back to that intention or theme. Like, what am I trying to elicit here? What do I want to get them to do? And it very well might be to just move, to just work out and stop thinking. But those are my cues then. It drives my communication. So let me know how it goes. Very, very anxious to see how this helps your class planning, and if it helps improve your confidence too. When you have a plan, you're usually more confident within it. So let me know if it helps and how it goes.